We got new numbers in. Oh boy, somebody's pulling away. Now, I was on 49-39. Jesus, Lord mercy. That's a Fox News poll. That's a 10-point lead. That's an open-handed slap, boy. All right, so I'm going to get to more of that in a second. But remember, very recently, I thought Trump was tied and in a slightly better position than Hillary Clinton, just marginally. But here we are, just 4 or 5 days later, and Trump has punched himself in the face about 12 times since then, with significant damage, and I'm going to show it in the polls for you in what we've seen since my appearance on ABC's This Week. And that's what started the trouble for him, not my portion of that program, but when he talked to George Stephanopoulos and attacked Kaiser Khan, Captain Khan, who was killed in 2004. That's a speech from the DNC. I'll get to that in a second. And then I'll give you all the swing states. He's all of a sudden in a world of trouble. Since then, he's also, had a controversy with a baby with a Purple Heart and been incredibly unstable about the idea of using nuclear weapons. I mean, it is one disaster after another. So even in a Fox News poll, he trails by 10. But I love Fox. I don't. I'm amused by them, though. Here's a screen capture of how they reported this news. Remember, she's crushing him in their own poll. Graphic, poll, Trump leads on the economy? That's the only positive thing they could find in the poll where Trump did better. So immediately they lead with, he leads on the economy. I mean, overall, he's getting killed. But anyway, it is what it is. Okay. So on that Kaiser Khan controversy, that's the dad of Humayun Khan, who was killed in Iraq. He's an American Muslim and talked about that at the DNC. So it turns out a whopping 77% of Americans knew about the exchange between Khan and Trump, which is a giant number. I'm not sure I would have expected it to be that high. So that made a big difference because nearly 7 in 10 of those who have heard about the controversy think Trump stepped over the line. So that was a significant body blow for Donald Trump. One more in that regard. This is all from the Fox News poll, by the way. 51% majority of registered voters agree with the Khans that Trump had sacrificed nothing and no one in defense of the U.S., including 30% of Republican voters and nearly half of independents. So he had done, a convention that had about 40% of Americans saying that it was a pretty good convention, but he got, 3-4 point bump, which is an okay bump out of it. Democrats do a convention that about 60% of Americans said was very good, and they got a bigger bump. So Hillary Clinton went from down a little bit to up about 5 points. So she had about a 7-point bump there, roughly, from their convention. And so she would have been up about 4 or 5, and then he steps into all these landmines. These are all self-inflicted wounds. So now let's go to the primary states and see what kind of damage it's done. And the answer is severe. So you go to New Hampshire. New Hampshire's already over. That's a 15-point lead for Hillary Clinton. Done. So if it is Trump versus Clinton, as we have it now, and that's a giant if, and I'll tell you why in a second, and the election was held not today, but in November. I'm calling New Hampshire already. In November. Okay. Now, the reason why it might be a little different, because there might be third-party candidates, et cetera, that's why I can't definitively call it today. But if this was going to be a traditional race between the Republican candidate and Democratic candidate, I would call the November election specifically for New Hampshire today. 15-point lead. Nobody makes up a 15-point lead. That is gigantic. Gigantic. Not talking about the whole election. I'm talking about New Hampshire. Okay? So now let me give you more details on that. First, let's go to Pennsylvania for a second. She's got an 11-point lead there. Now, I thought, again, as recently as my appearance on This Week, that he had a really good shot at winning Pennsylvania. All of a sudden, he's down by 11 points. Democratic convention bump, and then boom, Kaiser Khan, nuclear problems, and he's got nuclear problems all over the place. One controversy after another. He looks so unbelievably unstable. All of a sudden, the numbers shot up. Now, it's not as stark as New Hampshire, and yes, there is a difference between 15 points and 11 points. That's the first time I've seen an 11-point lead in Pennsylvania. Earlier, it was much closer in Pennsylvania, so that's still up in the air. But now, all of a sudden, she's distancing herself from him. Now, more details from Pennsylvania. 47% said they view the Democratic nominee favorably. to 49% who view her unfavorably. So it's not like she's killing it. She's doing not great. But Trump's spread, 33% favorable to 62% unfavorable, is further underwater. That's devastating. 33% favorable, 62% unfavorable in a state that he almost absolutely needs. Now, Pennsylvania has gone to Democrats for a long time. Since 1992, it's gone to Democrats fairly comfortably. People keep calling it a swing state when it really hasn't been for all that time. In this case, it could have been because the Rust Belt's really hurting, and that message was resonating there for a while with Trump. But if she's almost pulled even on unfavorables, and he's got a 2-to-1 unfavorable to favorable, that is really bad news for Donald Trump. It's so bad, it's so much bad news that this dynamic as a two-person race might not last long. Let me give you more states. Michigan, 41-32. I'm surprised the lead isn't larger in Michigan, but I would be shocked, though, if not only Donald Trump won Michigan, any Republican candidate won Michigan. So I think that's already in the Democratic column unless some sort of miracle happens. But get a load of this. 30% of self-identifying Michigan Republicans are not backing Trump. That is a giant number. 30% of Republicans are not backing Trump in Michigan. Again, a state he'd love to have. Okay, now, here comes the twist. Trump's struggles in the state's conservative strongholds are attributable in part to Libertarian nominee Gary Johnson. The poll found that in those west and southwest regions of Michigan, critical for flipping Michigan red, Johnson is drawing 10% and 16% support, respectively. Let me propose something to you guys. I believe there comes a point when Republican, and especially Republican donors, look around and go, do we pull the chute on this guy and actually go back Gary Johnson? Especially the Koch brothers, who dislike Donald Trump, have said already they will not give money to Donald Trump, who consider themselves libertarians. Did they look at a Gary Johnson and go, well, I got an extra couple of $100 million lying around that I was going to spend on the Republican nominee, but now I'm not going to. Did they give it to Gary Johnson and make this a real three-way race? Well, soon they might have nothing to lose. Trump recently was leading in Florida. Let me give you the last swing state here. 48-42 Hillary Clinton now. Now all of a sudden she's pulling away in Florida. What Trump has done to himself in this last week is unprecedented. I know that his whole campaign is unprecedented, but it is one giant self-inflicted wound after another. He cuts off his arm, cuts off a leg. What's left? He's bleeding out. And we've just gotten started. We have a whole another 3 months left to go. That is an eternity. If this keeps going like this, and he goes from 11 down in Pennsylvania to what, 15, 17 down. If he goes from 6 down in Florida to 10, 11, 12 down in Florida, this race is over. You can't be 11 down in Florida and come back. And these Republican politicians and donors are savvy folks. They'll see that, and they have got to do something else. That's why you need to buckle up for this election, because it has got a lot more twists and turns ahead. As the implosion of Donald Trump continues, it opens up this race to another possibility. Which way it's going to go, we don't know yet. It could go Gary Johnson's way in terms of money and perhaps support. But, oh boy, all of a sudden we have a completely different dynamic.